My name is Claire Johnson, and the day I married the love of my life was framed in soft June light, string bulbs, and a piano version of Can't Help Falling in Love. The camera found me in an ivory gown behind the venue's French doors, hands shaking, lashes damp, then followed me out as they opened. It should have been the day my family filled the front row. It should have been hugs, whispered, "We're so proud of you." The subtle rustle of tissues as vows cracked our voices. Instead, 3 chairs on the aisle sat empty like open questions. The lens lingered on those gaps, and you can hear it in the audio if you listen closely. A faint pocket of silence where their applause should have been. We'd sent invitations months in advance, all the details neat and hopeful. A garden in Tempe, Arizona, lemon trees, a sunset that always shows up on time in the desert. The RSVP card for my parents came back unchecked, then never came back at all. My brother texted once, "Busy quarter. We'll see." He didn't. I walked the aisle anyway. I said yes anyway. I danced anyway, buoyed by the warmth of my husband's family, the way his father pulled me into the family photo without asking, the way his mother kept smoothing my veil like it meant I belonged. When the band played the last song and the sparklers burned down to ash, we packed our gifts, folded table linens, and left those 3 chairs exactly as we found them, empty. That was the first truth my marriage taught me. Family is a verb. It's who shows up. I told myself I'd make peace with the rest. I built a life one upload at a time. A production studio in a spare bedroom, a calendar grid full of ideas, a team that believed we could make a living telling small, true stories. I learned lighting before daylight, audio after midnight, and how to add subtitles that made strangers cry at 2 a.m. The channel grew, then the company grew. We signed clients who'd watched my early videos from cubicles and then called me from corner offices. I learned to write checks without my hand shaking. Still, I kept my private life off the grid, no house tours, no address hunting, nothing the algorithm could swallow whole. But when I finally ordered the car I used to tape on my vision board, I let myself post one photo. Electric blue paint job, fully loaded, $120,000 of quiet and torque. I wrote 2 lines. To the kid who felt invisible, "I see you." I set the phone down and went to dinner. For 3 days, my phone did what it always does. Comments, shares, brand DMs about the colorway. And then, on the 4th night, my mother's name lit up my screen like a flare. Her voice came sharp, a tone I knew from chore charts and "Don't make a scene." "Where did you get the money?" she asked before hello. "We're having a family meeting tomorrow. You need to be there." "No, we're proud of you." "No, we're sorry we missed your wedding." Just a calendar invite with a command tucked inside it like a knife. There's a moment in every documentary when the subject looks past the camera to the person asking the questions and decides whether to tell the real story. This was mine. The truth is, I felt a familiar heat rise under my collar. A flashback reel of school plays and science fairs and report cards placed softly on a kitchen counter and left there. The truth is, my hand went numb around the phone. And then another truth pushed through. I was no longer the girl needing a ride home. I was a woman with keys. I said, "Okay," because sometimes you walk into the room to close the door for good. After I hung up, I sat at our kitchen island in the blue glow of that car reflected in the window, and I wrote a plan on a yellow legal pad. I listed what I would and would not discuss. I wrote the names of the people who had shown up: my husband, his parents. My team and I let their names steady me. I printed a single page with 2 words in bold at the top: boundaries. The pen bled through in places. That felt right too. Some lines you draw once, others you carve. Mic drop? They didn't show up for the vows, but they RSVP'd for the vehicle. The first time they said, "family," there was a price tag attached. If your family skipped your wedding but called after your $120,000 Tesla, would you face them in Denver or draw a boundary and decline? Tell me your choice and how you'd handle the fallout. Comment your city. Claire Johnson's story doesn't begin with the Tesla. It doesn't even begin with the empty chairs at her wedding. To understand why that phone call cracked something and set her plan in motion, you have to go back to the small neighborhood in Tucson, Arizona, where she grew up. The streets were lined with ranch-style homes, chain-link fences, and the sound of cicadas humming under the desert Sunday. It was middle-class suburbia, the kind of place where lawns were trimmed every Saturday and the ice cream truck's jingle floated through the evening air. On the surface, it looked like any American childhood. But for Claire, it was a house where attention was rationed and love seemed to follow a pecking order. Her father, Richard Johnson, worked as a claims adjuster for an insurance firm. He left every morning in a pressed shirt, his briefcase in one hand and a travel mug in the other. By evening, he was sunk into the recliner, football blasting, beer sweating on the end table. Her mother, Linda Johnson, held down the house as an administrative assistant at a local legal office, juggling appointments, bills, and grocery runs with an iron routine. And then there was her older brother, Brian the star. From his very first soccer game, when he scored 2 goals at age 9, the family's orbit tilted toward him. Dad's voice boomed with pride, Mom's calendar bent around his practices, and the neighbors clapped him on the back like he was destined for more than the rest of them. Claire was the shadow that moved quietly in the same house. At 8 years old, she stood in the backyard during Brian's championship celebration. The family had hung streamers and filled the grill with burgers. 50 people laughed under the string lights, chanting Brian's name, while her father beamed. Claire clutched a soda can so tightly the aluminum left a dent, her new yellow sundress unnoticed. She had thought maybe someone would say, "You look pretty, Claire." But the moment never came. She was the background character in her own home. A year later, she landed the lead role in her school's spring play, rehearsing lines in her bedroom mirror until her voice was raw. On opening night, the curtain's edge was rough under her fingers as she peeked out into the crowd, scanning rows of folding chairs. She knew exactly where her parents should be sitting. The seats were empty. At home, Brian had a math test the next day, and her mother decided studying with him mattered more. Claire walked out into the stage lights anyway, spoke every line perfectly, but inside her chest there was a hollow echo. No applause can fill the space left by silence. The favoritism wasn't subtle. By the time Brian graduated high school, her parents rented a banquet hall, ordered a towering cake, and invited half the town to celebrate his scholarship to law school. Claire, only 14 then, sat at a corner table poking at her dessert fork. That very morning, she had won a statewide essay contest. She brought home a plaque, polished and proud, showing it to her mother with wide eyes. "That's nice, honey," her mom said absently before rushing back to balloon arrangements. The plaque gathered dust on her dresser. Meanwhile, Brian's trophies gleamed under the living room lights like a shrine. Christmas told the story too. Brian got a bright red bicycle, brand new with a bow on the handlebars. Claire unwrapped a sweater 2 sizes too big. "You'll grow into it," her mother said distractedly as her father wheeled Brian's bike onto the driveway for the neighbors to admire. It wasn't about the price, it was about the message. He was worth celebrating. She was worth managing. Neighbors noticed. "How's Brian doing with his classes?" They'd ask her mom at the grocery store. "He's thriving," Linda would beam, launching into details about his grades and his internships. When someone asked about Claire, the answer was a shrug. "Oh, Claire's quiet. She keeps to herself." That single phrase carved deeper than any forgotten gift. It told Claire that invisibility had become her assigned role in the family narrative. Brian himself wasn't cruel. He'd toss her a good job when she aced a report card or pat her shoulder before running off to practice. But even his half-hearted nods felt more like obligation than recognition. The spotlight that bathed him was so bright it erased her. And then came the small, piercing moment she never forgot. Her 16th birthday. She had circled the date on the kitchen calendar in red marker, dropped hints about her favorite diner milkshakes, even left notes about songs she loved. That morning, she put on her best jeans, sat at the table, and waited. Her mom rushed Brian to a law school interview. Her dad buried his head in client calls. By dinner, no one had said happy birthday. Pizza arrived late, and Brian came home full of stories about his interview. They laughed together at the table while Claire ate alone in her room. The candles never came. The silence was louder than any party could have been. That was the weight Claire carried into adulthood, a childhood where every missed milestone stacked into a tower of absence. Each empty seat at the play, each dust-covered award, each birthday left unacknowledged became bricks she carried on her back. She learned early that if she wanted to be seen, she'd have to find her own audience. By the time Claire Johnson entered her teenage years, the silence in her house was no longer accidental background noise. It had a rhythm. It had a shape. It told her every day that she was the afterthought. Her parents' attention was a spotlight fixed firmly on Brian, leaving her in the dim shadows along the edges of the stage. At 16, the birthday they forgot was the breaking point. She woke up early that morning, straightened her hair, painted her nails, and waited at the kitchen table with a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. But as the hours ticked by, the hope dissolved. The word forgotten carved itself into her chest with each passing minute. By nightfall, her mother was busy with laundry, her father was glued to his phone, and Brian's laughter filled the house as he told stories about his law school interview. No cake, no card, no song, just silence. That night, Claire retreated to her room, the air heavy with pizza grease drifting up from the kitchen. She pulled out a spiral notebook, the kind she normally used for English essays, and began to write. At first, it was just scribbles of anger. They didn't even say my name today. Then, the words spilled faster, paragraphs that turned into pages. She wrote about the birthday that vanished, about the play where the front row seats were empty, about the essay plaque collecting dust. She wrote like she was talking to someone who finally listened. In those late hours, journaling became her secret sanctuary. When her pen scratched across paper, the ache in her chest softened. The notebook didn't applaud her, but it didn't ignore her either. It received her. By 17, her journal entries turned into sketches and doodles in the margins, ideas for videos she wished existed. She'd sketch out a girl walking down a school hallway with music swelling behind her, or a time-lapse of desert skies changing color, or a silent film about a girl at a birthday table with no one else there. She didn't show these to anyone, not even her closest friends. They were too raw, too precious. But the act of imagining gave her a small flame to hold on to in the dark. At school, Claire wore her invisibility like armor. Teachers praised Brian's name whenever he visited campus, and she learned to lower her gaze, to take notes without raising her hand, to turn in assignments quietly. But inside, she was a storm. She watched other girls with their parents cheering at track meets or clapping at choir concerts, and she wondered what it felt like to have your worth displayed in public. She didn't envy the trophies, she envied the recognition. That envy fermented into determination. If her family refused to see her, then she would build a world where strangers could. One winter evening, Tucson air crisp with desert chill, she biked past a community center window and saw a film club gathering. Kids her age huddled around a secondhand camcorder, laughing at their shaky footage. She stood outside for a moment, frozen, watching. Something inside whispered, "That's where you belong." But she kept pedaling, too scared to walk in. Instead, she went home, pulled out her journal, and drew a picture of herself holding a camera. Underneath she wrote, "One day." Her parents didn't notice the shift. To them, Claire was still the quiet one. They liked the convenience of it. A daughter who didn't demand too much, who didn't complain when they missed her recital, who didn't throw tantrums when birthdays vanished. What they didn't know was that every dismissal hardened into a vow. Claire began whispering to herself at night, almost like a prayer, "I won't need them forever, I'll find my own way." She stopped asking her father why he never came to her debate tournaments. She stopped sliding flyers across the dinner table for art shows. She stopped waiting for them to clap. Instead, she saved her applause for herself. She'd read her journal entries aloud in her room when no one was home, practicing how it felt to have her words matter. She'd rehearse lines from her sketches, imagining an invisible audience leaning forward, hanging on her every syllable. It was make-believe, but it was hers. There's a moment in every underdog story when resignation becomes fuel. For Claire, that moment wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, like most of her life had been. She was sitting cross-legged on her bedroom floor, doodling another storyboard of a short film about a girl alone in a crowd. She looked at the drawing and realized she wasn't just sketching sadness, she was sketching survival. This was her way out. She didn't know how yet, no camera, no audience, no plan. But the conviction was there. She would not vanish like her 16th birthday. She would not spend her life being the quiet one. If her family could not or would not see her, then she would create something so undeniable that the world would. That was the silent turning point. Claire Johnson stopped waiting to be chosen and started preparing to choose herself. The spark came in the most unexpected place, an elective class Claire signed up for in her junior year of high school. Officially, it was called Multimedia Arts, but for her it became the lifeline she didn't know she was waiting for. On the first day, June Ellis walked into the room, hair streaked with silver, glasses perched on the tip of her nose, and set a bulky camcorder on the desk like it was a crown jewel. "Art isn't just brushes and paint," she announced. "It's how you tell a story." "And all of you?" she said, scanning the room. are storytellers. Claire felt the words land like a match struck in the dark. For years, she had been writing in journals, sketching storyboards, imagining invisible audiences. Now someone was telling her that those instincts were not daydreams, they were art. Miss Ellis showed them examples of short films under 3 minutes. A skateboarder carving through Tucson streets. A stop-motion paper flower blooming frame by frame. A montage of sunlight shifting across desert rocks. The clips were rough, student-made, but they pulsed with life. Claire leaned forward, heart racing. She wanted in. She borrowed the school's old camera, a clunky device with buttons that stuck, and started filming the small things no one noticed. Leaves scattering across the asphalt after a monsoon wind. Her sneakers tapping against the sidewalk. Her dog gnawing on a squeaky toy, its rhythm like percussion. At night, she stayed up learning free editing software, fumbling with cuts and transitions. The first attempts were messy, jittery, the audio uneven, but they were hers. When the footage finally played back smoothly with music underneath, she felt something she had never felt in her own home, pride that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. One afternoon, Miss Ellis pulled Claire aside after class. She held up a printout of still frames from Claire's latest clip, raindrops tracing down a window pane. "You've got an eye for detail most people overlook," she said softly. "There's a local teen video contest. You should enter." Claire's throat tightened. No one in her family had ever said those words. You should. The idea of sharing her work terrified her. What if she failed? What if people laughed? But Miss Ellis believed, and for once, Claire wanted to believe too. For weeks, she obsessed over a 1-minute montage she titled Small Things. Streetlights flickering on, kids laughing at a bus stop, a stray cat darting through an alley. She poured herself into each frame like she was bottling her soul. On contest night, the community center buzzed with folding chairs, kids whispering in the back row, and parents clutching programs. Claire sat alone, clutching her knees, stomach twisted. One by one, videos played, some funny, some abstract. When Small Things appeared, the room went silent. Images of dew on grass, frozen lake reflections, and twilight over rooftops flowed across the screen, stitched together with royalty-free piano music. When it ended, the applause was louder than Claire expected. For a moment, she felt weightless. Then came the announcement. First place, Claire Johnson, Small Things. Her ears rang. She stumbled to the stage, trophy trembling in her hands. Strangers patted her back, telling her she had talent. But when she looked into the audience, scanning desperately for her parents' faces, the seats were empty. They had stayed home, saying Brian's mock trial needed attention. The victory, sweet for a heartbeat, soured in her chest. She walked home under Tucson's pale streetlights, trophy tucked under her arm, wondering how triumph could feel so lonely. The next morning at breakfast, her mom asked if Brian had finished his essay draft. Her father discussed mortgage rates over coffee. Claire placed the trophy on the counter, waiting for someone to notice. "That's nice, honey," her mom said, not looking up from her phone. Brian yawned, muttered, "Cool," and left for school. The trophy was moved to her bedroom shelf, where it sat collecting dust beside the essay plaque. Claire didn't cry that time. She didn't plead. She simply opened her laptop, created a YouTube channel she named Claire's Lens, and uploaded Small Things. She expected maybe 10 views. By the end of the week, the counter showed 100. Comments trickled in. "This feels like home. You captured Tucson in a way I've never seen." She reread them until the words carved into her. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. That contest, that shaky trophy, that small channel, they were the beginning. Claire Johnson had found her spark. And she wasn't going to let anyone snuff it out again. By the time Claire Johnson stepped onto her college campus, she carried more than a duffel bag and a student loan notice. She carried a fire. The University of Arizona had offered her a partial scholarship in communications, just enough to get her in the door. The rest, she covered with loans and a part-time job at a downtown coffee shop. Mornings were for brewing caramel lattes and wiping down counters. Afternoons were for lectures in crowded halls. Nights belonged to her laptop, its screen cracked at the corner, buzzing under the strain of editing software as she pieced together her next video. She kept uploading to Claire's Lens. At first it was dorm life montages and shaky skits about exam stress. Her subscriber count crawled to a few thousand, nothing viral, but enough to make her believe she was moving. Each like, each comment, Each stranger writing, "This made my day," felt like a brick in the foundation of something bigger. And each one whispered louder than her family's silence, "You matter." In her sophomore year, she took a digital media class taught by Professor Alan Burke, a wiry man with restless hands who paced the lecture hall like a conductor. He pushed his students past the basics of framing and sound. "A good video shows what happened," he told them. "A great video shows what it felt like." When he screened one of Claire's projects, a 2-minute short of late-night study sessions set to lo-fi beats, the room went quiet. "This has soul," he said, leaning on his desk. "Claire, you're not just cutting clips, you're speaking." For Claire, who had spent years trying to get her family to hear even a word, those 3 syllables "you're speaking" felt like oxygen. Burke became her mentor, dropping books on her desk about editing, pointing her toward film festivals, and nudging her to aim higher. In her 3rd year, he invited her to lead a team for a national competition. Universities across the country were asked to produce short-form campaigns for nonprofits. Claire's group crafted 1-minute videos about mental health awareness. She directed interviews, added subtle animations, and pulled all-nighters polishing transitions. Her eyes burned, her fingers cramped, but she felt alive. When they submitted, she doubted every choice. Then the email came. First place. They won $10,000 and a feature on the nonprofit's platform. In Chicago, Claire stood on stage with a glass trophy, her name etched in the program. Strangers applauded. She called her mom afterward, voice trembling. "We won," she said, hoping for joy on the other end. "That's nice, Claire," her mother answered distractedly. "Brian just closed a case today." Claire hung up, staring at the trophy in her hotel room, gripping it like an anchor in a storm of indifference. But the win did more than pad her resume. It hardened her resolve. She realized her family's approval was a currency she would never earn, no matter how hard she worked, so she stopped trying to collect it. Instead, she invested in herself. After graduation, she moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Tucson, walls bare, except for sticky notes scrawled with ideas. She freelanced for local cafes, shooting ads for iced lattes, promos for boutiques. The pay was low, but the practice was priceless. Her channel grew steadily, 50,000 subscribers, then 75,000, enough to monetize. She posted tutorials on editing tricks, vlogs about the grind, breakdowns of viral clips. One video hit 100,000 views, her first real explosion. Comments poured in. "Claire, you inspire me to start my own channel." She sat on the floor of her apartment, laptop balanced on her knees, tears slipping down her face. Words from strangers filled the void her family had left. The work consumed her. Days blurred into nights. She lived on ramen noodles and gas station coffee, her bank account balancing on fumes. But she wasn't deterred. She saw a path that stretched further than YouTube. A vision took root. A company dedicated to short-form storytelling for brands, riding the waves of TikTok and YouTube Shorts. She called it Pulse Media Studio. At first, it was just her, a camera, and a dream. But when she pitched the idea at a local tech conference, an investor named Sylvia Grant flipped through her portfolio with sharp eyes. "Your work cuts through the noise," Sylvia said. "Let's make it happen." With a $200,000 investment, Claire hired a tiny team and leased a small office space. Pulse Media churned out campaigns that popped funny, heartfelt, and polished. Local startups called, restaurants called, then a national retailer called. Their videos doubled online sales for clients. Within 2 years, the studio's following reached 1 million across platforms. Revenue climbed into 7 figures. Claire walked into their glass-walled downtown office each morning, the desert sun spilling through windows, and felt something she'd never felt under her parents' roof. She belonged. And she had built this belonging from nothing. Still, even as Pulse Media rose, one question haunted her. What would her family say now? Would they still shrug her off? Or would they finally see her when success wore dollar signs like armor? She didn't know the answer yet. But she would. And when that day came, she planned to be ready. By the time Pulse Media Studio turned 3, the once bare office with second-hand desks had become a hive of energy. Glass walls reflected the glow of monitors, laughter bounced between brainstorming sessions, and camera gear lined the shelves like a badge of honor. Claire Johnson often arrived before sunrise, a to-go coffee steaming in her hand, and stayed long after the city lights blinked on outside. She had built this place from scraps and sleepless nights, and every wall hummed with proof that she hadn't needed her family to validate her worth. But success wasn't instant glitter. In those early years, rent checks nearly bounced, and the company lived on ramen and favors. Claire's team pulled all-nighters editing ad campaigns for coffee shops, who sometimes paid in gift cards instead of cash. There were weeks when she worried she'd have to shut down, when her bank account read double digits. Still, she pressed forward. "We're not just making videos," she told her team. "We're creating the language brands use to talk to people." That belief became their backbone. Then came the break. A campaign for a regional fast food chain. Pulse Media filmed workers singing in kitchens, customers laughing in drive-through lanes, all set to catchy original music. The video went viral across Arizona, drawing millions of views in days. Sales doubled, the chain renewed their contract, and other companies began calling. Suddenly, Pulse Media wasn't just another scrappy startup. It was the studio people wanted on their side. By the 5th year, Pulse Media's clients included restaurants, tech firms, even a national retailer. The revenue sheet turned from red to black, then soared into 7 figures. Claire signed checks without her hand trembling. She began to notice how people spoke her name differently now, not as the quiet one from her childhood, but as a force in digital storytelling. Local news ran a feature. From Tucson bedroom to media empire, Claire clipped it, not to send to her family but to remind herself what survival looked like. With momentum came opportunity. At a conference in Austin, Claire stood on a small stage pitching her vision for the future of short-form media. In the crowd sat executives from a major streaming platform looking to strengthen their social presence. Weeks later, a call came. They wanted Pulse Media, not just as a vendor, but as part of their empire. The negotiations stretched for months, filled with tense boardroom meetings and endless drafts of contracts. Claire, who once couldn't get her parents to show up at a school play, now sat across from lawyers in tailored suits, holding her ground. When the deal closed $18 million, she didn't cry. She exhaled. The first check she wrote was to herself, erasing years of student loans in one swoop. For the first time since she was a teenager scribbling in journals, she felt unshackled. The second thing she did was buy something she had always taped onto vision boards. A Tesla, electric blue, fully loaded, $120,000 gleaming in her driveway. It wasn't just a car, it was a monument. Every curve of metal whispered, "You were never invisible. You were building this all along." But the car wasn't what made Claire happiest. What fueled her was watching her team thrive. Designers paying off their debts, editors upgrading apartments, interns becoming full-time employees. Pulse Media had changed more than her own life. It had carved space for others to be seen, the way she had once longed for. Yet beneath the success, one ache lingered. Every time a client toasted her at a dinner, every time an award landed on her desk, every time her bank account overflowed with numbers, she could hardly process she thought of her family's silence. No phone call, no letter, no "we're proud." She had achieved everything they once ignored, and still, the empty chairs remained. The truth was, Claire had stopped needing them long ago, but she hadn't stopped wondering, would there ever come a day when they reached out? And if they did, what would they want, her heart or her wallet? She didn't have to wait long for the answer. Claire met Daniel Foster on a chilly October morning at a coffee shop in downtown Tucson. She was hunched over her laptop, editing footage with headphones in, eyes tired from a week of deadlines. He was at the counter, tall and broad-shouldered in a flannel shirt, ordering a black coffee with the calm ease of someone who knew exactly what he wanted. When she reached for her cup and nearly collided with him, he grinned, a warm and steady kind of smile. "Guess the universe wants us to caffeinate together," he joked. She laughed, surprised at how natural it felt. That moment turned into a conversation, and that conversation stretched into an hour. By the time they parted, Claire realized she hadn't thought about work once. Daniel was a mechanical engineer, practical and grounded, the kind of man who liked to fix things with his hands. Where Claire thrived in the chaos of storyboards and client calls, Daniel found joy in order, blueprints, and precise measurements. Their worlds were different, but they fit. He admired her creativity. She found peace in his steadiness. Soon, late-night editing sessions came with takeout Daniel picked up on his way over. Saturdays turned into hikes through desert trails, where he'd talk about bridge designs and she'd stop to film cactus blossoms catching the light. Their rhythms intertwined until it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. A year later, on a quiet Sunday, Daniel asked Claire to marry him. There was no elaborate stage, no viral video proposal, just the two of them on a bench by a lake, the water reflecting the Arizona sky, his hand steady as he held out a simple ring. "You're my home, Claire," he said softly. "Will you marry me?" Her answer came out in a rush of tears and laughter. Yes. For the first time, she could picture a future that wasn't about fighting to be seen, it was about being cherished. The wedding planning was both thrilling and bittersweet. Claire chose a garden venue strung with fairy lights, the kind of place she had dreamed of when she was a little girl sketching dresses in her notebooks. She mailed invitations to her parents and brother, her heart tight with hope that maybe, just this once, they would show. She even called her mother, voice trembling. "It's my wedding," she said. "Please be there." Her mother paused, then muttered something about Brian's schedule and promised to try. Claire hung up knowing the answer before the day even arrived. On her wedding day, Claire stood before the mirror in a gown that shimmered like moonlight. Daniel squeezed her hand, whispering, "You're beautiful." When she walked down the aisle, the seats reserved for her family sat empty, as cold and unyielding as stone. No dad to walk her, no mom dabbing her eyes, no brother. She had held on to hope until the last second, but they didn't come. No call, no text, nothing. Yet as she stood with Daniel, their vows trembling in the night air, she felt a different kind of fullness. His parents sat front row, tears streaming, whispering blessings under their breath. His sister arranged the playlist, dragging everyone to the dance floor. Afterward, his family hosted a backyard reception with picnic tables, homemade pie, and laughter that rang out into the night. When Daniel's father raised his glass and said, "To Claire and Daniel, welcome to the family," her throat tightened with both gratitude and grief. In that moment, the truth settled in. Family isn't always blood. Family is who shows up. But even as she danced with Daniel's cousins under string lights, the absence of her own family clung to her like a bruise. She smiled for photos, leaned into the warmth of her new family. But inside she was quietly shattered. She had built a life, a company, and now a marriage, all without the people who should have been there first. That night, as she lay in bed beside her new husband, Claire whispered into the dark, "I won't beg for them anymore." Daniel pulled her close, his voice steady. "You don't have to. You're enough for me." And for the first time, she let herself believe it. Still, she didn't know that the next time her family reached out, it wouldn't be for love. It would be for money,